Tov, Baruch Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Avodah Zarah daf Amud Daled. Avodah Zarah 34. Today's daf is dedicated for a shmir for the Chayalim, Atzal for the Shvuyim, Yeshua for Am Yisrael, and the Seis Tzara. We're going to start on the bottom of Lamed Gimel Amud Beis 33b, 5 lines from the bottom. It says the Gemara says that Darish Maremer expounded. Let's say you have a kunya, you have a utensil that was covered with lead, and as a consequence, it's not boleya, it's not absorbed. So therefore, bein uchma, bein chiyura, bein yeruka, whether it's covered with black or green, whether it's a black utensil or a white utensil, or yeruka is in Lashon of the Gemara is yellow, or yellow utensil, shari, you can, if your wine went in it, it's not going to be prohibited because the assumption is that those utensils are covered with lead, therefore they're not boleya, they don't absorb, and so therefore your wine is kosher. So the Gemara asks the question, but why is this different than chametz on Pesach? They went to ask Maremer, and they said, Hani mani dekunya, can you use these lead utensils? Can you use them on Pesach? And he said, Yeruka lo tibailach, the mitzar fiu bali. For sure you can't use the yellow ones because it's certainly porous and it absorbs well. And so therefore it's prohibited. Ki tibailach chivri v'uchmi. It's only a question about white or black. So and ki ispe. And so therefore, what would be the law under those circumstances? And then he said, and certainly if there are cracks in it, don't ask the question, because for sure you can't use it on Pesach because it absorbed it. Only when it's a question where it's smooth. And so therefore, so they asked Maremer this question, and Maremer responded to them about whether or not you can use these utensils on Pesach, the white and the black utensils, or the smooth utensils. Amrulu on the top of 34a, he responded, Ana chazina lahu, I saw them, I saw that when they were, Raj says, mazian, that they were sweating, that they were basically condensing their water. That I saw that because they absorbed so much, the outside was perspiring. And since they're perspiring, so it's for sure it's an indication that they've already absorbed in the past. So therefore you can't use it on Pesach. So how come on Pesach we say you can't use any of these utensils? You can't use the yellow, the black, the white, the porous, and for sure not the porous, and even the smooth. So why on yayin? Why with respect to wine? Why with respect to wine do we say that it is permitted? So that's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara answers, my time. Well, first he continues explaining about Pesach. What's the reason why it's prohibited on Pesach? The Torah told us about a pottery utensil that it never, once it's absorbed, it can never get that absorbed taste out of it, and so therefore it'll always be chametz. So Tosfos asked the question, what are you talking about? I'll tell you what you could do. You could put the pottery utensil back into the fire. You could put it in the kiln, and therefore it would be like a new piece of pottery. Like we're going to say in Zvachim pretty soon, God willing, in Daf Tzadi Vav. And so, and there in Zvachim, we said the reason why you can't do it is only because you don't make these types of fires, these ovens in Jerusalem, or these stoves, these ovens in Jerusalem, but otherwise it could do it. So Rabbeinu Tam says, the ein zeh nechshav yotzei midei dofno. So Rabbeinu Tam says, this is not considered to be koshering it, like getting rid of its flavor. The adraba, kli achar chashvinan, upanim chadashas polokan. He says, it's just a totally new utensil. So yeah, you could kosher it that way, but it's basically like making a whole new utensil. So therefore, that's why it's not considered, once the pottery utensil absorbs, you can't kosher it. Yeah, you could put it back into like uh, burning hot fire, but then you're basically making a new utensil. Okay, so the Gemara asked the question, so why is this different than wine, which we say you can't use in those utensils because we say it's absorbed from the yayin nesach that was in it, the non-kosher wine, so therefore you can't put the wine in that utensil. The darashal marimer kul mani de kunya shari. There are marimer taught in all these cases it's permitted. And so the Gemara answers, if you want to say chametz is biblically prohibited, and the yayin nesach that we're talking about is wine that was only rabbinically prohibited, because we're not talking about wine that was actually nesach, that they actually used it to worship idolatry. We're talking about wine, stamim. They put the wine of the idolater in a utensil, and now we can't use it, which is rabbinic. It can't be that that's the reason. Called the tikkun rabbanon k'india tikkun. Whenever the rabbis instituted something, like in this case, yayin nesach, they instituted to apply to it all the laws of the Torah. K'india tikkun. So if that's the case, if we're going to prohibit the chametz on Pesach, we should prohibit the yayin nesach, and we should prohibit to be used the wine in these utensils because it absorbed from the non-kosher wine. So the Gemara says, the distinction is with respect to chametz, all the days of Pesach, it was used with hot, and so therefore it absorbed much better, it absorbed in a much more intense manner, whereas the yayin nesach was only used with cold, and so therefore the utensil was not absorbed as much in it, and so therefore it's going to be permitted. And so that's why we can use it for, we can use those utensils. The Gemara says, Rabbi Akiva Ikol and Ginzak. Rabbi Akiva came to this place called Ginzak. That's how Rashi's gear says. Other gear says are that Mar Ukva came. Tosfos says it can't be Rabbi Akiva because we were going to see that Rabbi Akiva didn't know the answer to these questions. How could he not know the answers? And also, if it was Rabbi Akiva, we would typically use the language of Maisa. There was an incident with Rabbi Akiva. But Rashi has the Girsa in Tainus of Mar Ukva, but here it's Rabbi Akiva. So anyway, Rabbi Akiva came to this place called Ginzak. They asked from him the following questions. A, Misana Lashos, so A, Misana Lashos. They asked him the question, what is it considered to be fasting for hours? What's this question? So Rashi, the way Rashi explains is, and there's different opinions about how to explain this, but basically he said, I want to accept upon myself a fast day from 6 hours onward. But nevertheless, that morning he got up and he skipped breakfast and lunch. And so he didn't do that for the purpose of the tinus. So now he said from the beginning of the day, I'm going to fast from the noon onward. But it turns out he didn't fast in the morning. So is it considered to be a fast at that point? So he says, Anenu, and we'll see, the Gemara is going to say that the Nafkamina, does he say the prayer of Anenu? Is it considered a fast? That's the first question. Well, they didn't know the answer. Number two, are you allowed to use these jugs of the idolaters that were used for yayin nesach? Can you use them? And he didn't have the answer to them. And then the third question was, what did Moshe wear during the 7 days of the inauguration of the Mishkan, where Moshe did all the avodah? He couldn't have worn the garments of the Kohen Gadol, but it says these were the garments for Aaron. So what garments did Moshe wear? Did he just wear his regular civilian clothes, or did he wear something special? So those are the three questions. He didn't know the answers. Also, Shalbei Midrash. So Rabbi Akiva went to the base Medrash. Amri, and they told him, Hilchasa, the halacha is misanin l'shos. The halacha is that you can be misanin for shos, and it's considered to be a fast day under those circumstances. That's the first thing that they told him. So therefore, he's obligated to fast at that point. Boker Tov, Jeff. And number two was Vim Hishlim. And if he completed the fast, mispal tefillas tainus, so he would say Anenu, he would say the prayers of the fast day. Number two is Hilchasa Kankanam Shalovdei Kochavim Lachayud Beis Chodesh Mutarin. That the jugs of the idolaters, when can you use them? Yeah, after 12 months, you're allowed to use them immediately without any without any repairing of them, without any koshering of them. And if you want to use them prior to that, you could do what's called miloi v'iro. You could fill it up and pour it out. So these are the kankanim of the idolaters. After 12 months, you're able to use them. The Chacham Tzvi has a tshuva that's become, Chacham Tzvi is the rabbi, the chief rabbi of Lviv, Lemberg. They're all the same city. So the Chacham Tzvi has a tshuva that if people have this china and they want to kasher it, even though it says we just said he says that after a year you can use it in order to allow people to come back to tshuva, and otherwise we'll push them away. So he says here, this is one of the bases for that tshuva, is it says the kankanim of the idolaters after 12 months is permitted. And number 3, what did Moshe use the 7 days of the inauguration? The cholak lavan. He had a white garment, a very special white garment. And Rav Kahana maslim b'cholak lavan she'em bo imra. He says a white garment that has no hem. Why is he has no hem? So Rashi says, well, one reason why he didn't have a hem on it was because there was this idea, you have to be clean, not only in the eyes of God, but also in the eyes of Israel. So Moshe wouldn't be suspected of stealing the money from the Mishkan. But Rashi says that can't be, because there was no money left in the Mishkan, because they just used all the money for the building of the Mishkan. So there wouldn't have been any money in the treasury. So anyway, so now up to the next piece. If you have the chartzanim and the zagim, these are the seeds and the shells of the idolaters. We learned in our Mishnah, they're prohibited to have any benefit from them. That's the position of our mayor. Chum said that if they're moist, they're prohibited because it's like wine, but if they're dry, it's permitted. So it says the Gemara, if they're moist, they're prohibited. If they're dry, they're permitted. So what's considered moist? What's considered dry? What does it mean that they're moist? 12 months after they're made. After 12 months, Yivashim is after 12 months. Itmar, we learned. Says when they're prohibited, you can't have any benefit. When they're allowed, you're even allowed to eat them. So Amar Rav Zvid, Hai Dur Dai Dachamra, these the Aramai, these dregs of the wine of the Arameans, Bas or Trace or Yarchai, after 12 months, Shata, that after 12 months, they're going to be shari, they're going to be permitted, because we're going to say that they dried out from the wine that was absorbed in them. Amar Chaviva Hani Afta Detaye. So these are the canteens made from very thick leather of the travelers. Basar Tracer Yarchei Shata Shari. After 12 months, you could use them, because we see any wine in them dried out. Hani Portsini Daramai. These are the also like the dregs of the grapes. Basar Tracer Yarchei Shata Shari. After 12 months, they're okay. Hani Gulfi Shechimni Vuchimni. So what are these a reference to? So this is also a reference to like these black and these red pottery utensils of the idolaters that they put the wine in. After 12 months, they're going to be okay, because we're going to say that all the wine dried in that was absorbed in them is permitted. Morios, our Mishnah had said that there was this fish brine and the cheese of the Beison Yoki of the idolaters. From there says prohibited, you can't have any benefit, but the Chachamim say there's no prohibition to have benefit. So the Gemara says, Tanar Bana Murias Uman Mutter, that if it would be the Murias of a craftsman, meaning an expert chef, that would be permitted. The reason is, Rashi explains, the Murias is never made from non-kosher fish. The reason why we say you can't eat it is because of the wine that's in it. But an expert chef doesn't put in the wine because he knows that it ruins the taste. So therefore, the murias of a craftsman, of an expert chef, would be permitted. He doesn't need to make it taste better. Rabbi Yehuda ben Gamliel, Amar Shimon Yochanan ben Gamliel, Af chilek uman mutter. Also, chilek. What's the chilek? There's a type of fish that's kosher, and its name is sultanis. And when it's young, it has no fins and scales. But now it will grow them later on. And we say later on, the chilek of idolaters is prohibited because they take because what they do is they take other small fish and they mix it in with it, and so therefore you're going to have non-kosher fish similar to the chilek that go with it. But if it will be from the uman, since he's an expert and he knows how to separate them, then he's going to take him out because he knows that those other fish are going to ruin the taste, and then it'll ruin his whole ship. So the craftsman takes out the non-kosher fish, so you can eat the chilek from the craftsman's fish. No, it's always mutter if you know for sure if it's from a Jew or if it's from a craftsman, because the concern is not about the chilek, the concern is about the other fish that they typically sell with it. Yeah, so is it permitted when it's young? It's going to grow. It just as a baby, it's born without it. It doesn't grow. It always grows. There are some fish that have the fins and scales when they're in the water, but then they lose it when it comes out of the water. Anyway, so the Gemara says, that the murias of the craftsman is permitted. The first and second time the first and second time that they used to do is they used to take the murias and they would pour water and salt on this murias. First and second times they do that to get the juice, it's permitted. But the shlishi also, but the third time it's prohibited, because then they're trying to mask the taste with the wine. And it says, the first two times you have a lot of oil, you don't need to add wine to it. That point on, you add the wine. So then there's a fish of this murius, but the asil in the mela, the Akko. It came to the port of Akko. He put the mashkichim, the watchman, on the boat to make sure that they didn't pour in the wine. So who protected it till now? Until now, what we have been worried about? If you're going to be concerned of mixing the wine, kista de morias pluma, kista de chamra, but ume. They wouldn't add in the wine because the wine's more expensive. A measure of morias is a pluma, and a measure of wine is 4 ume. So presumably it's a lot more. Pluma is the zuz, Rashi says. And the wine was sold much more expensive. But in this place, the wine is cheaper, so we put on the mashkichim. So I'm going to Rav Yirmiyah Verzera, Dilma Ivy the Tzur. Maybe they came to Tzur first on the way, and there the wine is much cheaper. I'm really no. No, there's a lot of currents and high waters from the melting snow, so we don't have to be concerned. So they put the mashkichim on the boats, but only when they came to the port. Nowadays, when you have a tuna fish, this is a big controversy between the Star K and the OU. The mashkichim, the Star K sends the mashkichim for the tuna fish boats out on the boats themselves, out into the deep water, so that they could watch the process when they cook the tuna out there. Also, make sure that there's no small fish that are caught in with the tuna. So now the Gemara says, the gvina space onyoki, the cheese of the house of onyoki, is prohibited to have benefit, and to eat the very mer say it's not prohibited to have benefit from it. Amar Rishimon and Lakish Mimnei Ma'asru Gvinas Anyaki. Why do they prohibit the cheese of the Anyaki? He says Mimnei Sharov Agom Shal Osa Ayir Nishchatim Avodas Kachavim, because most of the calves of that town are slaughtered for the purpose of idolatry, and so therefore, since most of them are slaughtered for idolatry, and what they do is they make the cheese by putting it in the keva, the stomach of these calves. And so since we follow the majority, they're coming from calves that were slaughtered for idolatry. And so therefore, a person who makes the cheese in the stomach is going to be prohibited to have benefit from, because it's idolatry. It's prohibited also to have benefit. So then the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, why my area, for saying that according to Rabbi Meir they're prohibited, my area rovagon, why did it say since the majority of the calves, the filonami, mionami, even if it's just a minority of calves, the Rabbi Meir chayesh l'miuta, Rabbi Meir throughout Shas is concerned about even a minority. This is the case in Yevamos, where Rabbi Meir says that a katan and a minor boy and a minor girl, Rahman, if they fall to chalitz or yibam, we don't allow them to do either one. And the reason is because we're concerned for the minority, maybe the katan will be a sris, maybe he'll never be an adult male, maybe the katan will never be an adult female. It's also in a positive way. There's the idea of the Rabbi Meir Balanese that if you need a miracle, you give tzedakah to the support of Rabbi Meir Balanese, and then because a miracle is even the minority circumstances. So that's why we believe that's even for miut, that's for good. But so the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, Ma'ir Yerovagol, if it's according to Rabbi Meir, I feel mionami, even a minority, Meir Chayesh Mutar, Meir was concerned about the minority. Gemara says, no, I Amris Rov Ika Miut. If you're going to say, so the Gemara answers, if you're going to say that most of the calves in that place are slaughtered for idolatry, then there's an Ika Miut, then there's a minority of the calves that are minority of all the animals in that place, because all the other animals, together with the calves that are not slaughtered for idolatry, are the majority. If you say most of the calves in that place are slaughtered from idolatry, then you're going to have a minority of calves that are slaughtered for idolatry are the minority of all the animals in that place. But if you say, and so therefore you'll have the miut, Eli Amris, but if you say miut, only a minority of the calves in that place, because then you have a majority of calves. You also have all other animals that are not slaughtered. I believe miut to miut. It's a double limitation. Oh, miuta, the miuta will chayesh Rameir. Rameir is not worried about a double limitation. The Gemara is going to discuss that in Chulin, whether or not it's permitted, or do we say that that part of the keva is yavesh ke'etz, it's dried out, it's no longer meat. The Gemara is going to discuss that at length. It's a major, major topic. When you slaughter it for idolatry, what's the big deal? Atu deshari. So Reish Lakish, the Rishon Lakish says to Reish Lakish, what do we care if you slaughter these calves for idolatry? You are the one who himself allows us to get benefit from calves that are slaughtered for idolatry. The Idmar Hashocha behema is rok damo avodas kachavim. If you slaughter an animal to sprinkle its blood for idolatry, mahakter chalbo avodas kachavim, to burn its incense for idolatry. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asura. Rabbi Yochanan says it's prohibited because he's in the position that you slaughter from one animal. We're going to assume that we transfer from one ritual to another. So since you slaughtered it to sprinkle its blood, also the slaughter of the animal is itself idolatry. But because and he learns this out from the service that was done outside the temple from inside. I mean, they just like you bring a carbon, if you think the wrong thought, we're going to say this, it's considered pigul on a different service, and the carbon will be disqualified. So too, if you slaughter an animal in order to do a different service with it for idolatry, it's going to be disqualified. Reish Lakish Amar Muteris, but Reish Lakish says it's permitted. So what do we care if you slaughtered it for the purpose of sprinkling its blood to idolatry? So Rish Lakish says, Amarei, no, Tirmanech Shatach. He says, basically this means raise up your time, meaning it's shkoyach. You asked a good question. Shkoyach to you, mazel tov. But that's what the word mazel tov means. You have a good mazel, your time is good. But Omer bigmar zvicha who ovda. He says, no, my service is I'm serving by the completion of the sacrifice itself. So the sacrifice itself is a service. And we went to the Mishnah there. Rabbi Yehuda asked Rabbi Shmuel, Amar Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda said, "Show Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Yeshua." That Rabbi Shmuel asked Rabbi Yeshua, and they're walking along the road. He says, "Why is the cheese of the idolaters prohibited?" And Rabbi Yeshua said, "Because they curdle it, they're mamid it in the stomach of a carcass of a nevela. So it gets the non-kosher flavor of the carcass." So it says Rabbi Shmuel, but isn't the keva of an ola more severe than the keva of a nevela? And nevertheless, we say that if you eat the keva of an nevela, it's not considered to be misappropriating temple property. So Rabbi Yeshua said, no, you're getting benefit from the idolatry. He says, if that's the case, why the Chacham not prohibit to have benefit? So so let's say you want to betroth a woman. This is something to bear in mind. You meet a nice girl, Elliot, and you want to marry her. So you say, can I betroth this girl with the perish? Perish is the dung of a shor niskol, of an ox that was supposed to be stoned. After the ox was stoned, you ran up and you grabbed the dung. And now, you're not allowed to get any benefit from that animal, but you want to know if you could betroth the woman with the dung. So that would work. That would work. But perish, but with the perish, the dung of a calf of an idolater, then it wouldn't work. So why? You could say it's logical. By the idolatry, you want the perish. The idolatry wants the perish because they want to have a big animal. And so therefore it's part of the animal, and so therefore you can't get benefit from it. But by the ox that's being stoned, he doesn't want it. He doesn't care if it is bigger or not. It's being stoned. And so therefore the neficha, the dung, is not part of the animal, and so therefore you can betroth a woman with it. I was thinking like this, that you could say that this is a part that's prohibited. There's nothing that's seemingly less valuable in the world than the dung of a shor niskal. And yet you could take it and marry a woman and build a beautiful house from that. You could build a beautiful house even from something which we think is worthless. You could also say it's a pasuk. It says by a city that's supposed to be destroyed, you can't take anything. Any connection to idolatry is prohibited. And it says there with respect to shor niskal, sakol yisakel ashor v'hu yachelas besaro. By shor niskal, besaro asar appears muteris, but the dung is permitted. And amar ava travayotinanadhi. Both of these laws are taught in our Mishnah. From the fact that we had this conversation with Rabbi Yeshua, and Rabbi Shmuel asked Rabbi Yeshua, and so Rabbi Yeshua responded to Rabbi Shmuel that the reason why the Chacham say it's prohibited is because they curdle the cheese in the keva of a carcass. But isn't a keva ola stricter? Because the Isuri Ano Sharu Pershayu. So that this proves that by an ola that the dung of this is permitted to have benefit from, because the milk of the ola is like this perish, is like its dung, and we say you're allowed to swallow it. And from the fact that Rabbi Yeshua said to Rabbi Shmuel that the reason why the Chachamim say it's prohibited is that it's because the Chachamim, it's because they say they take the cheese and they make it in the cave of the idolaters, become a other way. And Rabbi Shmuel says, then it should be prohibited to have benefit because of Avodas Kochavim also pershayu. This proves that the dung or the whatever is excreted from the idolaters, their perish is prohibited. And so therefore we can prove from a Mishnah that that's the logic. Okay, this is today's daf. Yashikoch to everybody. Shikoyach, shikoyach.